Here's the thing about new Cherry Vanilla Coke. Though cherry's named first, all the flavors taste just as great. I mean, it could have just as easily been Vanilla Cherry Coke, or it could have been Coke Cherry Vanilla. And since it's two amazing flavors of Coke, it might have been Coke Vanilla Cherry Coke or Cherry Vanilla Coke Coke. Unless you're in France, which would make it Le Coke de la Vanilla de la Cherry de la Creme. New Cherry Vanilla Coke. So good together. And new Cherry Vanilla Coke Zero Sugar. Same great taste, zero sugar.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
On this week's Court TV podcast, the trial of former Dallas police officer Amber Guyger has begun. Will the prosecution be able to prove she murdered Botham Jean when she entered his apartment? What will it take for her lawyers to prove it was all just a tragic mistake? And we'll recap the corn rake murder trial now that the Iowa jury has delivered a verdict.
This is the Court TV podcast with Vinnie Politan and Seema Iyer.
Welcome to the Court TV podcast, or welcome back if you are returning. I'm Vinnie Politan, along with my friend, colleague, Seema Iyer.
Hello, good morning.
How many people do you think are actually returning?
Returning listeners?
Yeah, I think we have a bunch of them.
I think we have a lot of returning listeners, hopefully some new listeners that we want to thank. We have so many wonderful reviews, and people are, they're trying to give us 6 and 7 stars, but I think 5 is the max.
Well, we really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for all your support. Because your support keeps this thing going. Because if the reviews dry up and everything else, the suits upstairs are going to pull the plug on us.
And it really is one of the best parts of our week, I think.
Well, I know you are super excited.
I just love this. I love it so much. I love it so much. It's great. I love everybody who's here helping us put this together and the end product. And it's really nice that we wake up on Thursdays and we get all these great texts and messages, and
I love
everybody. I love it.
Well, the thing is, we've got so many things happening at Court TV. It's like fast and furious, one after the other, case after case. We got another one now. This might be the biggest one so far.
I think so. It really is a huge trial. Amber Guyger, the white Dallas police officer who is on trial now for shooting an unarmed black man, Botham Jean, in his apartment.
All right, some people are going to call you on that and say, what does it matter that she's white? Does it matter?
I think the reason it matters now is because what this country has gone through in the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years, really when the Trayvon Martin killing at the hands of George Zimmerman occurred. And that was a Florida case back, and I think the trial was the summer of 2013. But things since then have evolved into racial questions.
And there absolutely is that backdrop to all of this. And it's about police also. So the story here in a nutshell is Amber Guyger is a police officer. She's in her uniform, goes at the end of her shift, is going home to her apartment complex and ends up going into her neighbor's apartment. Her neighbor, who lives directly one floor above her, goes into his apartment. He's an accountant. He's eating a bowl of ice cream. She shoots and kills him.
Exactly. Now, when you say, does it matter that she is white? Well, it mattered from the jump because she was charged with manslaughter and now she's on trial for murder. So that is the initial question that I think our listeners deserve an answer to, is why? Why did this go from manslaughter to murder? And let's talk about the Texas murder statute.
Sure.
Now, this sad, traumatic death occurred on September 6, 2018. Amber Guyger, she's the one who calls 911. And that evening, Botham Jean dies in the hospital. Now, that night, Guyger gives a blood sample, and she doesn't get arrested right away, though. The next day, she still has not been interviewed, but the Dallas police get a search warrant for Jean's apartment on September 8th. This is what was interesting, because it is a Dallas police officer being investigated. The Dallas police give the case over to the Texas Rangers. They take over the investigation. her name is then released to the public. Now, she turns herself in the following day, September 9th. Texas Rangers interview her. She is charged with manslaughter. Manslaughter, as you know, is just an unlawful killing. It is not murder in the first degree. It's not murder in the second degree.
Right. It's conduct that is less than intentional. It's reckless conduct. Oftentimes, it's you are responsible for the death because of your conduct, but it wasn't like you set out to go and kill someone.
Exactly. So this case moves forward as a manslaughter. However, the family is very vocal. There are a lot of protests going on, not only in Dallas, but throughout the country. And it took a few weeks until September 24th when Guyger gets fired. And that's when the family really demands that the charges be upgraded to murder. And in fact, the charges are upgraded to murder, but not until November 30th, 2018. This case is presented to a grand jury, and I'm holding the indictment.
Okay.
And when I saw this indictment, I thought, wait a minute, it seems like a few words are missing, because the statute says there was an intentional and knowing cause of death. Intentional and knowing. What's missing? Doesn't something...
Premeditation? Malice?
Not in Texas. Not in Texas. And that is the,
it's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference.
It's a game changer.
So let's set this up. So there is federal murder statutes. There are state murder statutes. Every state is different. So for instance, in New York, if you kill a police officer, you're automatically charged with murder in the first degree. New York, it's really hard to be charged with murder in the first degree. Now, here, this is murder in the first degree. And in most states, like you had mentioned, there is this element of premeditation. Most states require intent, deliberation, and premeditation.
Right.
And premeditation can be what? Days of planning?
It can be days, weeks, months of planning. It can be in an instant, but there has to be that moment where you are somehow have a moment to deliberate, to think about it before acting on it, before doing it. And a lot of times, that makes the difference between what is a murder case and a manslaughter case in other states around the country. Then there's other states, we've covered cases in Georgia where there isn't the premeditation, but there's the element of malice. But in most states, there's that extra element. And in Texas, it doesn't exist, which makes things a lot easier and cleaner for prosecutors when they're going for a murder conviction.
Oh, yeah. And I'm glad you brought up malice, because malice is an interesting definition. Yes, often connected to first degree murder. And it generally includes an evil disposition or purpose or an indifference to human life. Now, that's also an interesting phrase, indifference to human life, because sometimes we connect indifference to human life with reckless disregard or depraved heart. So these are things that listeners, depending on where you live, your murder statute may have that evil disposition, that depraved indifference, reckless disregard. These are, but not Texas. Texas, intentional and knowing.
Right. And if I look at the facts of this, she fired the gun and intentionally shot. I mean, is there any dispute about that? She's in this apartment. She thinks there's an intruder, and she pulls her weapon and she aims it, she shoots it, she fires it, she kills it. That's what she intended to do. Murder.
Right. It is murder. But I want to just go a little more granular with the word intent, because I think that people in normal language, people think intent means tonight I intend to have a salad for dinner. No. When you eat the salad, the eating of the salad is in your intent to eat the salad.
Right. When I grab the fork and put it into the bowl, that's when I am intending to eat that salad. Now, I plan to maybe have a salad tonight. I may be premeditating the salad, right? Exactly. And maybe I go and I buy lettuce. That's an act in furtherance of it, right? So now you've got more evidence of my intent to make that salad and eat it, right?
Exactly.
Maybe I grab some mayonnaise and ketchup. What would I do with that?
A hamburger?
No, make Thousand Island dressing. That's the secret recipe.
First of all,
most people don't know that. Now you do.
Okay, now I'm going to vom.
What?
You're gonna. That's how. Is it? You actually make these things,
That's
and
how
you call
make Thousand Island. It's mayonnaise and ketchup. It's that
Do you
easy.
make Thousand Island dressing at home?
Well, no, sometimes I make it at restaurants. If I want Thousand Island, they say, "Oh, we don't have any." I go to the server. Well, do you have mayonnaise? They say, "Yes." Do you have ketchup? Yes. All right, bring me those. I'll make it myself.
That sounds so gross.
That's
Your food choices disgust me.
Island.
Okay, so anyway, but the point is, conscious, objective, or purpose is the most people use that as the definition of intent. But just doing the act means you intended to do the act. Because she shot him, she intended to shoot him.
Right.
Knowingly, because she knew. And this is not in dispute. Even though she says she was mistakenly in that apartment, she thought it was her apartment, she thought it was an intruder. But did she know that she was shooting a human being? Yes, she did.
Yeah. So in this case, I think it's relatively easy for prosecutors. Well, no case is easy, right? But it's easy for them to fulfill those elements. The question is, when you look at those elements, how does the defense then approach it? What do they say? How do they try to combat the fact that it's obvious and basically admitted that she shot him and she intended to shoot him and she intended to kill him?
What they plan to do is something that we're going to talk about later in the pod.
But first, we're going to talk about an issue that surrounds all this, right? Amber Guyger is a police officer. She's in her police uniform when this takes place. But was this an actual police shooting? The answer depends upon who you ask.
Follow Court TV live over the air, uninterrupted. If you're watching television with an antenna, just rescan your channels now to add Court TV. And go to CourtTV.com to see the exact channel position and more ways to watch Court TV in your area.
You know, when I think of the term police shooting, there's a certain fact pattern that comes to my mind because I've covered so many of these through trials and when I was doing local news as well. It's something happens, there's a call, police respond, and then guns are fired. And there's a police shooting. Either the police shoot and kill someone, they shoot and miss, they get shot, whatever it is. That's the traditional police shooting. Police are on duty and responding to a call about something that's happening. Perhaps it's a crime in progress or some suspect that's wanted. And this case, Amber Guyger, to me, is a little bit different. And, you know, she's getting off duty, right? She's been on duty all day.
She's off duty.
And she's on her way home.
But in her uniform.
She's in her uniform.
With her police bag.
And her weapon.
And her weapon and that bulletproof vest or something.
Sure.
But and her weapon, right? That's the important part.
So is this, from your perspective, because you've represented so many police officers and worked with them, is this a police shooting? Do you think this is a police shooting?
No, it is not a police shooting. However, this is exactly something I would have had to represent a police officer for. So first of all, with the NYPD, they have really strict rules.
That's who you worked for.
I worked for the NYPD for a few years before I came to Court TV, essentially. But major rule, you cannot be in your uniform driving home. You have to change in and out of your uniform at the command. It's a major violation if
Interesting.
You don't. Right. So that was just think about it. Like if I'm leaving my command in my uniform, I go to fill up gas.
Right. Everyone presumes you're on duty.
Exactly. So the bottom line is you go to work in civilian clothes, you leave work in civilian clothes. That's it. Okay. The other issue is the gun. Now, I think there are officers who keep the gun at home so they can, but there's rules in terms of carrying your weapon. So that wasn't as much of an issue. But the point is, it is not a police shooting if she was not on duty.
Right.
Full stop.
But as I listen to prosecutors putting this case together, that's the way they're couching it. And
why?
I'm not, and I can tell you why. Because I think they want to hold Amber Guyger to a higher standard than a civilian. So take a listen to what the prosecutor said in his opening statement.
She departed from her training and her orders as a Dallas Police Department police officer. Their orders and her training are that if you come across a person that is inside of a habitation, like a burglar, if you have the opportunity to safely do so, you are to take a position of cover and concealment and contain that individual and call for backup. These rules are made and designed primarily because that maximizes the safety of the police officer. Incidentally,